right, so on the agenda for today, we're going to go through introductions, run through some house rules, not necessarily in that order, housekeeping, upcoming Adobe opportunities, and then we will go over to the good stuff. So, house rules. We want to make sure that we're staying user focused. This is intended to be a safe space for everyone to learn to, spend time really digging in on Marketo and how that works. So we really are strong in our, no self-promotion, no pitches of any kind. We want to make sure that you are not reaching out to people that maybe you see in the participants list with any sort of solicitation without their consent. You guys chat and say, yeah, connect with me or whatever, that's great. And some people may be sharing their use cases here, so please don't take that and just share it at large without communicating with them first and getting their consent. Thank you all for abiding by the house rules. A couple housekeeping items. So all meetings that are recorded are posted to mugs.marketo.com, and the slides will be posted there as well. And then you'll get the recording and slides via email post this session. All right, so without further ado, I'm Andy Crone, I'm your moderator, and I'm gonna have each of our panelists go around and just give a quick intro, name, company you work for, and what year this is for you in your champ journey. Who wants to go first, or should I pick on somebody? Max, you're not muted. Why don't you hit it up first?
I'll go for it. I'm Max Morier. I lead the marketing operations and analytics function at Druva. This is, I think, coming up to the end of my year one being a champion, and we'll see what happens.
I can go. My name is Chelsea Cattage. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations at McGraw-Hill, and for the K-12 side of the business. This is year 5 and my last year. So I will be done after this. I feel like I put in my time for 5 years. So I'm excited for all of you guys to carry on the program.
Yeah, you've hit your max capacity, right?
Yeah, 5 years. I mean, same age as my son. So it's a good time.
Yeah. All right.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Amit Chen. I am IT specialist at Atlassian. My day-to-day job is to basically bridge the gap between marketing and IT. So I closely work with lots of developers and try to translate the marketing needs to them. So I had to dig into APIs and all that stuff. So ready to take your API related questions or any integration related questions here. It's my 2nd year as a champion. So yeah, excited to be here.
All right, Tori, that's you last.
All right. Yep. My name's Corey Bayless. I am with AWS and I am a program automation manager. And I work on one of our 5 instances of Marketo. And I do a lot of things.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. So we're excited to have all of you join us today for Champ Office Hours. We're going to dig in on some good stuff here. So before we get to it, some quick upcoming opportunities. We do encourage you, if you are not already a member, to join the chapter for Office Hours. The link is there. And again, this presentation will be shared out. So if you need the link to post, you can get it there. And I think we could also probably post it in chat. All right, certifications. So there are now officially 3 certifications that you can get for Marketo Engage. These include the professional level certification, the expert level certification, and the new master level certification. So you too can be a Marketo Engage master. Fun thing to add onto your resume. I know there's some upcoming mugs around what that new test looks like. So if that's of interest to you and you are at an architect level, heavily encourage you to sign up for those as well and get a deeper dive on what that looks like. Summit, 'tis the season. So coming in hot, March 15th through 17th, we will be doing virtual Adobe Summit 2022. There will be there'll be 4 champion-led sessions, including 5 Marketo Engage reports to get you a seat to the C-suite, diagnosing and treating an inherited Marketo Engage instance, which can be very painful, getting started with Marketo Engage, tokens cloning and such, and tricking out Marketo Engage, leveraging recent innovations. So definitely some to add to your agenda for that. And registration, as I said, is open. So go ahead and get your spot now. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and we will dive into some of the good stuff, questions here. So I think probably, why don't we kick off with, I've got a question here for you, Chelsea, which is around lead scoring. The submitter of this question wanted sort of best advice for getting started with lead scoring.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I wanted to take a question similar to this because and people might not like my answer, and that's okay. I am not a huge proponent of needing to have lead scoring. I don't think you have to have it. And the reason I answer it this way is I'm not saying not to, right? So the way to get started with it is see if it works for your company first. A lot of that depends on your sales team, how sales works, how your routing works with sales. So if you are planning on doing lead scoring, one thing I would do is meet with the proper sales leadership or sales partners that you have, see how you currently are giving them leads, get some feedback on the leads, and then, set up a trial lead scoring program. A lot of times what I've done before is put it kind of on a blueprint of how you would score the different activities and demographics and test it out. There's been times I've turned on the lead scoring program just to see volume and what type of leads come through and not actually send them to sales. So just pilot it. And then, from there, talk with sales and kind of launch it. When I say you don't necessarily need lead scoring, I think that what you need to look at overall is just your routing to sales in general, right? So at McGraw-Hill K-12 side, we don't use lead scoring. We just do sales ready hand raisers, and that works really well for us. But again, it's because our reps are already so busy with a lot of these hand raisers that until they meet their SLA of getting back to these leads within 1 to 2 business days, I'm not going to give them more people that I just think are ready, right? So that's where I really want you guys to make sure you challenge yourself that if you don't think your Salesforce team can handle, people who are raising their hands with a timely manner, then start there. Start with very, very obvious people saying they want to talk to reps. But again, it's all about conversations and kind of documenting it out and meeting with the right people. That's really how I would start.
Agreed. Does anyone else want to layer in there?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really well said. Another thing, also that if you want to make it advanced or sort of increase your level of lead score, you can start looking at behavioral and demographic as well. It definitely, if you have a specific channel that produces, high value customers with job titles that really attain to how your sales process and pipeline moves, you can start weighing different types of job titles for how data enters your system. So Chelsea, really good start to that, but you can expand it into, and then you can then move that into an account score if you're even more sophisticated.
The other thing I'll layer in there too, I think is one of the most valuable pieces of information advice that I ever received as it related to scoring is don't score on anything you don't have near 100% transparency into. So if only 50% of your database has a certain data value or 25% has, don't include that in your demographic. You're not ever going to have a full picture of your database based on that data point. So either you need to enrich it or you need to skip it. All right, so let's go round robin here. Let's see. Corey, one of my favorite things to hear you talk about, someone wanted to know, how does the REST API merge a bulk amount of duplicates? How does that work?
It's a good question. Yep. So it's a most active winning formula. So a lot of times it goes by your last updated particular lead in the database, and then you can create. I don't remember the exact terminology. I apologize. It's been a couple of months since the team has talked about it, but you're basically saying that one field that has the correct value overrides the other fields, which is what determines the champion of who is the true customer or true piece of data in your system. And then Marketo has a system, the API also has a system where it will just kind of merge all into one. One caveat to that is one problem we found is that when there's multiple lead scores that existed, sometimes those lead scores can get combined. So you need to make sure that if you do have that you definitely want to utilize the new feature that doesn't auto compound lead score, which is good because it just auto creates MQLs if you have a certain threshold. But yeah, that's essentially how it works. Amit, I know you've run some API work. It's correct me on the field, the name of the field. It's like basically where it's if the lead has these particular fields, it sort of overrules any of the duplicates that don't contain, and then that's how it creates this matching process. But it's been a second since I looked at it.
Yeah, I remember I implemented it, and what we did is basically before we merged these records, we actually look at the data, and we did some data massaging in our database before actually doing that merging, and we identified based on certain roles, like based on the
Yes.
data
Yeah.
sparsity, like if one record has more data than other record, or one record has more accurate data than other record. So we actually tagged them. Okay, this is going to be the master, lead record, and this is going to be your the one which is going to be deleted or getting merged into the another one.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what we did is we actually also looked at their score, and we actually updated the final record with a checkbox in Marketo saying, hey, this record was merged. And we added that checkbox in our lead scoring just so that it is not getting scored again just because of the new data which is getting into that.
Yep.
And also at the same time, we also implemented another smart campaign, which was actually resetting the complete at least demographic score, and executing this merged record through the demographic scoring campaigns again. So that way you will have the final and accurate demographic score at least on that merged record. So I remember it's been actually I think a couple of years when I actually work on that, but I remember these steps that was involved. So it's not a straightforward thing. You have to actually plan it and do some data massaging before you actually start merging.
Yeah, and then to add to that also, Marketo has a tool that will help you auto merge, but you can also build a tool if you're sophisticated enough in the API with the endpoints that are available. That is, I would say, not easy to do, but yeah, there's a couple of different options.
Yeah.
Sort of kind of following that train of thought and piggybacking on that, there's a question around Marketo creating a lead, so top of funnel, and then Salesforce creates the contact, middle of funnel, and the two systems, they're using the native connectivity, but they're still having two records in Marketo. They're getting duplication there. So how to address, preventing this? Are there proactive solutions to prevent this? Amit, I think you were going to take this one. So.
Sure. So actually, one of the main reason of duplicate is this problem when you are feeding data in both systems, in Marketo as well as in CRM, because you have to understand this. For this particular sync, Marketo and Salesforce, the dedupe key is SFDC ID, either SFDC lead ID or SFDC contact ID. It's not the email address, right? But if you are getting the data from any other source, let's say from web form or list import, your email address will be the dedupe key. So if you are getting duplicates, Salesforce is going to be one of the major, major source of that. So as a best practice, I would highly recommend to, plug in all your data sources from you are acquiring leads or contacts to Marketo by default, right? Just in case if that is not working, and if you don't have native integration with Marketo, but you have native integration with Salesforce, you have to make sure you have some tools, or maybe some Dedube tools that you are using to regularly merge those records. Otherwise, it's going to be a really big issue.
I would just add on to that though, like, I think, we have a scenario, and I'm sure a lot of people do, where our sellers are directly adding leads and they're never going to go through Marketo, right? They're not going to want to interact with our map. So I think it's where, this is hard for marketing ops people to do, but we have to be pushy with our friends in sales operations and get them to close those gaps. I think a lot of prospecting platforms that plug into Salesforce have native functionality that will allow dedupe on things like email address, but there are a lot of sources coming from potentially your product, things like that will create duplicates in the system. That is where you need your Salesforce teams, Salesforce developers to build automation to create that dedupe. And they shouldn't necessarily need to go out and buy some sort of third-party platform like Ringlead to do that. It should be something they can prevent upon import. But closing those gaps is going to be the best way to prevent duplication when you're not able to feasibly plug it straight into Marketo.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And one practice.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think one practice that I've seen in some companies, what they follow is, by default, they create contact, right? So if you are getting a lead, they have some auto conversion for leads, and they convert all the leads to contact. So if you are creating a duplicate lead in CRM or in Marketo, it's going to auto merge into existing contact. So some people actually follow that process as well. If that's feasible for you, you can go through that route as well.
Using an account-based approach inside of Salesforce is something I've seen a lot of companies moving toward, just because it solves for a number of problems. And I think all of this stems back to also having a really strong, collaborative, positive relationship with sales operations and whoever owns, particularly Salesforce, within your organization, and making sure that they understand how the systems are interacting and reacting to each other, right? They create a bunch of stuff inside of Salesforce and then realize, oops, and it's already in Marketo, and they go delete it. You may end up with a bunch of orphans you're never going to be able to remove inside of Marketo. So having those kind of rules of engagement in advance too can help nip a lot of this in the bud before it even becomes an issue, I think.
Also, and I can add this little trick in there, is that SFDC type of contact or lead, if that value doesn't exist, then that means that it does not exist in Salesforce. So another really good way of determining what is a lead and what is a contact. And I think a lot of people also fail to sort of understand that one of the biggest issues that we all face is the different tables that a lead and a contact lives on, and that a lead can't live in an account, but a contact can. And so this is what creates the need and necessity for ABM, which people are like, oh, it's a methodology. It's also a technology as well. So yeah, there's a lot there for sure.
Absolutely. I'd love to take a minute here and kind of pivot away from kind of in the back end nitty-gritty on the system. There's a great question about goal setting for the team. This particular submitter said that they feel like the team doesn't have measurable KPIs, and then they're struggling to explain what their impact actually is to their management. Max, do you want to field this one?
Sure. I'm not going to plug any particular tool because of the rules, but there is a, I think this is something I struggled with for a while. And one of the things that we are responsible for is just stability and scalability of our systems. And that's really hard to measure. You can put things out there and about like % of leads enriched to try and maintain, some sort of level of enrichment stability or something, or marketability of your database, there are certain metrics that are a little easier to get to. But how do you talk about, you know, the fact that your processes haven't broken for a certain period of time? There's some technology out there that we're employing to give us results like that, quarter over quarter, and show kind of changes in our process stability. But I also think it is a difficult conversation, but again, it's one of those scenarios where you have to be able to verbalize to your management the impact you have on other teams. So talking about how you have facilitated the success of your demand generation team, or your web team, or your sales team, your SDR team, through the projects that you've worked on. It's not necessarily going to be as cut and dry as, you know, 10% increase in XYZ or something like that. It's going to be about the project completion. But again, there are some tools out there that are now able to kind of give you a view of stability over time, which is something we're starting to use too.
Does anyone else want to layer in there?
Well, one thing I would like to mention, and like Max kind of alluded to, and I think it's key, is our team launched an intake form when I got on board here. And that's another way of showing impact, right? If you don't have a project request form or an intake form that maps to Jira, Asana, you know, said PM tool, how are you going to showcase what your team's doing? So I think that's one of the first, I think the easiest solutions to overcome is if you are a service oriented team, helping out demand gen, sales ops, whomever, implement that intake form. It's going to help with resourcing, organization, keeping your team accountable. But then at the end of the year or quarter, you can showcase what your team has worked on. I know one thing we struggled with is marketing ops. So I oversee automation and operations, so campaign ops and architecture backend ops. One thing we struggle with is marketing ops projects always take longer, right? So a lot of people in leadership were like, why has it taken 3 to 4 months to set this piece up? And so showing them our intake form in the process, that it's not just a button that you turn on, that was really helpful for them understanding why our team needs people that we need, why we need the time, you know, to complete projects. So I think that's a really good solution to implement as well.
That hits me directly in the feelers for me as well, because I think a lot of times one of the things that happens is that people don't realize the infrastructure you actually have to have built underneath in order to make a program successfully run, and the level of sophistication that needs to exist in your code in order to make it that really good customer experience, or enough of a customer experience where they're going to want to trust your company and they're going to want to give you the details and data that you need, right? So I think the conversation of how, and like Max was talking about, how you have all of these different email templates, program templates, and all these various things that you're building in Marketo, you have to pay attention to that. You can't just pretend like that's not a big deal, because half of the, like actually 90% of the build process is putting all of those things together to make your campaigns flow in the directions that they want them to go, to provide the customer experience that you want. And man, I need leadership to like totally understand that is like a real thing, and it is a huge burden on operations. If there's anything that anybody gets from this call, it's that exists, and it is definitely a skill set. So yeah, it's so important.
Of that. Another huge part of our job, listed among the many, is actually documentation, which came up. And Chelsea, I'd love to have you field this. This particular submitter wanted to know if you are a believer in one master document or in smaller topic-related or topic-specific documents.
Documentation makes me happy and giddy. So that's when you know you're in the right space, right? But my senior manager of marketing automation is amazing. She has spearheaded all of our documentation. The question about one master versus smaller ones, I would be interested in seeing anybody who has a master documentation of everything. We have a SharePoint site. It's our center of excellence. Wiki pages, is we call it a lot of different things, but essentially it has all of our standards in there. So our form standards, our program standards, lead import templates, our sales and marketing routing, because that's really complex, how it's built in Marketo, just in case we've all been there. You update a campaign, you accidentally delete something out or change it, and you're like, oh crap, how do I fix this? We even have that kind of layered in. So I think that it's important to have documentation, but again, not too much where it's overwhelming to somebody onboarding either. You really want it to be organized by how your Marketo instance is set up. And the great thing is when you onboard somebody, you can just be like, here you go, here's all of our documentation. If they're already a Marketo expert, all they have to do is take a look at it and they're already ready to start building programs for you. So I would say try to have them separate, but maybe map up to a center of excellence. And the nice thing too is if leadership ever asks you how something's set up, we have, like for example, our routing, we have a visual flow of how it looks. I can't tell you how many times I've just attached that to an email and said, hey, here's how our routing works. Let me know if you have any questions instead of explaining it. So huge fan of it. The hardest part, and I would love to hear from the other panelists, is making time to update it, to actually do the documentation. That's really what we struggle with because it takes a lot of time.
We are, so we have a similar microsite. Personally, it's really hard for me individually to do that on a recurring basis. So I try and set myself and my team kind of general OKRs where it's like, okay, every single one of us, myself included, once a quarter, update or create new documentation for something just to make sure it's there. And on the concept as a whole, I think it's also something that we should just as you build out documentation, consider it covering your own ass in a lot of cases too. If you have documentation, you give someone kind of a meeting training, in person, you chat them through it, you point them at it, and then they don't actually use it. You can fall back on that and say, we gave you the training and we also gave you the documentation, you're still not using it. And it's a good way to make sure that you're not the problem, which, is maybe not the best way to look at it, but is helpful sometimes. So, it's hard to maintain an update, but sometimes just setting actual expectations on a quarterly or annual basis for your team helps.
And just to add what Chelsea mentioned here, you have to be very organized when you are, creating your documentation. I've seen, companies where, their documentation is scattered at multiple places. People are, just documenting on their local machine, or, someone is, documenting on Google Drive, someone is documenting on Share Drive, someone is just typing emails, lengthy emails. So that is not how it is going to work, because you need a central place. And you need these documents very organized. It should not be okay, you're just randomly putting those documents there. It should be in an order. It should be these documents should be categorized according to different different things. Like for example, if you have a specific data process, one for that. If you have integrations, third-party integration, one category for that. If you have specific templates. If you have documented that, then one category for that. So you have to be categorized, and really organized there. Otherwise, people will not be able to, take that benefit.
I also keep a change log. So anytime anything's changing in the system, I'll make a note of it, the date on which it occurred. And then if it's more than just a small tweak, I'll go in and make a video, even if it's 60 seconds or 5 minutes or something like that, and then save that video in the link. So when I have a chunk of time that I've set aside for myself, for the team to go in and update documentation, I have something that I made that was top of mind at the time the change occurred, so I can log why the change happened, what the specific difference was, and then also if something we changed did not function as anticipated, we have sort of that record of what that process was, and can kind of go back to how long has it been an issue, how far back do we have to go do remediation, all those types of things.
I love the video documents. Actually, it's a great way, because I personally feel it takes less time, and the other person can actually see the demo, how you actually set that up and how it was working and not working. So video documents are really great.
Yep. You can also take a quick video, depending on how long it is, 60 seconds or less, and flip it into a GIF and then insert it in your PowerPoint documentation so people can actually see the steps we're walking through, which is one of my favorite little tricks of the trade on presentations. So. All right. So kind of circling back on some additional other areas of best practice. We have a question here around testing new lead nurture programs. And I'm going to push this one to you. Specifically, they wanting to know how to A/B test your new lead nurture against maybe your existing or control nurtures as you're launching, new nurture programs.
Sorry, I was on mute. So that's a really good question, actually. So to test the lead nurture programs, what I did in the past, actually, first of all, you have to have a clear understanding how leads are going to flow through, different tracks in your nurture program. So first thing I would suggest is to have, a flow chart, and it should have all the, all the ways a particular lead can go through, right? And based on that, create different scenarios and create different test cases in an Excel sheet, right? List out what are the different ways a lead can go through that nurture track, and list out the expected output, right? Get your team, like 4 or 5 people from your team, and ask them to help you test out. Add them into nurture program. Use the native functionality of our test stream functionality in the nurture program. Use that function and ask people to do a specific action according to your transition roles or other smart campaigns that you have set up, and just record how that is working. So this kind of thing has really helped me out figuring out where it is going wrong and what could go wrong. Another thing, actually, a few days back, I was just scrolling through LinkedIn, and I read something really interesting. And that person actually suggested to add yourself into the nurture program one day before actual execution. Like if you are actually going to launch that program, let's say tomorrow, add yourself today as an actual lead. So every time, in every cast, you will be receiving all the emails one day before your audience is going to receive those emails, right? So you can actually look at those emails. If any link is broken, or if you notice any spelling mistake or something like that, you can easily go there and fix it. So that's another really great tip there. Now, if I move to the second part of the question, which was how to A/B test your newly set up nurture program with your existing programs, right? So what I feel is there is no out-of-the-box functionality available yet, but what you can do is you can create a smart campaign like a gatekeeper, right? And you can use random sample to split the audience. If it's a batch one, so you can split the audience into two parts, like 50-50% using random sample. Add 50% of your audience to the new program, and 50% audience to your existing one. You can schedule some reports, email performance report or a stream performance report to yourself. Look at those reports weekly or whatever you want, and just look at those reports and identify which engagement program is working best for you, and just route all the leads from that gatekeeper kind of a smart campaign to that nurture program after some time.
And I want to add one other thing that also will really help you. And you're probably like, but what about governance rules and how do I test? Turn everything into an operational email, and then you can bypass all of those rules. And then you can basically start a nurture stream as you would, right? Except make the cadence of how you're setting it into a testable format within a day. So that way you can see the flow, and you can actually push data through it, test data with an alias, right? A lot of people, what you can do is do your email and then plus an alias and then your domain. And then that way it'll create all this new data in your system. And now you can basically, you can simulate what actions you would see, and you can look at your activity logs to see if people are doing the right actions, and then is it going to the right campaign, or the right things picking up. And so that's another really good way to test your nurtures. But yeah, I bet you're right on with everything else.
That's a really good suggestion, Corey. Just creating your own multiple email addresses. You don't really need a team.
You got to hack the system sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
So kind of jumping from nurture, I think sort of a logical evolution of that. Around re-MQLs, Max, I would love to have your sort of thoughts on what is best practice for setting up people to re-MQL. So you've nurtured them, they've hit the threshold again, or they've hit a new threshold. What does that look like?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and I've seen it happen. I've seen it kind of approached several different ways. First, just like anything, figure out the actual scope of this before you dive into like a super complex solution. Figure out how often people are hitting that threshold. If you haven't gotten a re-MQL program set up yet, try and gauge how often people are hitting that threshold and not getting MQL'd correctly, to figure out if it's actually an issue or if it was like one time a salesperson was like, this is a massive problem and you need to make this a quarter-long priority. But then in terms of solutioning, you can approach a couple different ways. Depending on how important the long-term historical data is to your company, it would kind of determine how you want to approach it. So one way is if you don't see people re-MQLing all that often, and when they do, it's pretty far apart from the MQL dates, you can consider just straight up overriding like MQL date information if it's not going to create a massive historical issue. You'll still have the history, like in Salesforce, your sellers will still be able to see that, right, in the person's history that their MQL information changes. But the real best option that I've seen is to create a custom object that records the history of MQL information over time, and specifically the MQL date. I think more than anything is just to understand and record and have that historical record on the Marketo side as well as the Salesforce side of what the kind of what the breaks are in between MQL time, so that you understand how often this happens or how long it usually takes people to re-MQL, and just that you don't lose that history. But honestly, right now in our org, we just overwrite it because there are very few people that re-MQL quickly. The other thing I'll say on the front end is we don't allow people to re-MQL within a certain period of time. So we will prevent them from hitting that MQL threshold if they've MQL'd in the last 2 or 3 months. It's not that they're not necessarily engaged, but if they haven't gone and filled out a demo request form or a contact us form or something that's actually like, I want to talk to sales right now, we're not going to let them MQL for at least a quarter.
I think another factor to be really mindful of that, or mindful of as you're considering this process, is what's it look like from a Salesforce side, and are there processes over there that are going to cause oddness. So in other words, if your original MQL came through and it was a lead, and then the practices, sales accept it, they convert it to a contact, and then that transfers from being owned by an SDR to then handed off to an AE who manages the remainder of the sales process. That person's now a contact. So if you MQL them, is the AE then prepared to handle that new MQL status on a contact? Is there even a process in Salesforce for that person to be flagged, surfaced, for them to see them? And you want to make sure that type of change to your lifecycle is done in collaboration, so that you're not just throwing information over to an area of the fence where there's literally no patrol walking by, and you're just going to end up with a garbage heap there of what could have been good revenue that's left on the table. Because there wasn't that cross communication. All right, Corey, I've got one here for you. So a lot of stuff related to APIs, obviously. But one of the questions that came up was, what's a good way to help a team of Marketo experts or even a single Marketo expert start working with APIs independent of having a developer team? So I know a lot of us out there don't have wizards to help us with developing stuff inside of Marketo. What are some recommendations you have for how to get started with that?
Yeah, question I get a lot. And I am not going to sugarcoat it. The API is very tricky. But if you ask yourself one question, which is this a repeatable process that I need to run across a lot of stuff? And if your answer is yes, then the API is for you. So to get started, how I did it is I learned how to write basic calls. I just learned how to do some really, really simple stuff. I connect into the system through my launch point partners. Amit and I did an awesome webinar, not pitching the webinar, but saying that like we've provided you a lot of really good resources that will get you started. And it teaches you from how to set up your launch point partner within Marketo, give it the appropriate API roles, and then gives you the client ID secret and also your Munchkin ID are the three things actually that you need in order to authenticate into Marketo. There's also some open source libraries that are built in Python that will help you write very, very basic calls. That webinar has all of those resources. But what I will tell you is this: once you write your first successful call into the API, you now have a full understanding of what can I move to next. And I usually start with gets or approve landing pages, very simple calls that get me going, that say, what is the console telling me? Okay, cool. I have success. Great. All right, now I'm ready. Now I can start coding and doing a little bit more. And what it does is it incorporates the fundamentals of Python, which I'm a huge proponent of Python. And the reason why is it's fast. It's fast and it's very syntax light, and it's pretty easy to easy is a strong word to use. It is one of the more syntax light languages that you can use to write basic calls. And so, yes, I will provide the link to that webinar here in just a second. The next most important thing is that you understand how Marketo's UI can sort of be understood in a developer's mindset. So DevMops is a passion of mine. It's also a lifesaver for me because of the scale that we work at AWS. But what happens is that like every single thing that exists in Marketo is an object. They all have IDs associated with them. So if you're ever going to take action against anything in your system at a large scale, all you really need are those IDs, right? That's really the start of how you kind of understand it. And then if you really want to start getting technical with it, you can take those IDs and you stick them into an array, and then you separate that array out by your target list, right? Marketo automation, depending on how you're looking at it, is a batch automation. It's not a cycled automation that continues running against the system. That's not to say that you can't create that, but for a lot of the use cases and the power of the system, it really depends on what your requirements are. That is a great way to start thinking about how to use the API. Really getting your first calls. I highly recommend you download PyCharm. It's the easiest IDE to work with. And learn how to put the launch point partners into Marketo. Learn how to authenticate your first calls. There's a great, Jep has a great library that I always like to promote. It creates auto authentication for you. And those are all my recommendations of getting started. And if you have more complicated questions about the API, I'm always happy to answer them. But a lot of times what I'll do is I will send you to the developer documentation and point to me where that endpoint is. If the endpoint is available, we can write the code. If the endpoint's not available, I can't write the code. Another example of one that I found today. If a batch campaign is running, right, and it's processing data, and I want to send a call into that batch campaign, I actually have nothing that I can use to abort. I can't abort a batch campaign. I can turn off a trigger, but I can't abort a batch campaign as it's currently running. Why? Well, right, look at the current situation. We want to pause all the emails. All of a sudden, now I've got 100 campaigns that are running and I can't actually pause any of them, right? So you can see that there's definitely gaps in the API. That's why champs are here to help facilitate and tell the development teams what they are missing and how they can improve the system.
Awesome, thank you, Corey. I think we've got just about 10 minutes left here, so I would love to have a final question that we just put to the whole team that's joined us today. So for all the champs on the panel today, Someone said that they recently received their Marketo Engage Certified Expert credential. Congratulations to whomever submitted this. I know that's a big milestone. They want to know what we recommend as next steps for continuing their learning around Marketo Engage and advancement from, you know, the MCE, or formerly known as MCE level.
Well,
I
coming to
would
this is a
say-
good start.
Oh.
Go for it, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I was
yeah.
actually going to say something similar, like attending things like this. Yeah, I think putting yourself out there and, you know, being involved in things like this is really important. You know, being involved in, I know there's different MOP Slack channels, the community, just asking those questions and offering up help makes you learn. Being involved in things like this, like for example, Corey, you mentioned the API with auto merging duplicates. Like I didn't know that was a thing. So I'm still learning too, right? So I think exposing yourself to things, people are going to bring up situations you've never heard about, and it's going to help you learn to understand how to take it to the next level, and then offering up in your current role, just a different way to do projects too. You know, if you're building the same type of programs over and over again, or the same type of architecture, look at the community and think of a different way to build it. You're only going to learn more if you try more. If you're just kind of set in complacency, you're not going to learn much, right? So I know a lot of times what I would do is try to mix things up the way that I build them, go through some older programs and see how I can fix it. Really just being curious is a good way to really start to develop that expert level and, you know, further from the exam.
I'd also recommend a lot of what came up today. I think also, you know, when we're talking about like deduplication and scoring, and a lot of that is contingent on understanding your sales organization and your CRM. Like Marketo's one thing, but it supports a lot that happens in your CRM. It's tied to that. And the more you understand Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever you're using, and how objects work and how data gets fed into those systems, and what you can and can't reference when it comes to account data and custom objects, that will open up a lot of learning opportunities on the Marketo side, and understanding how to leverage Marketo to support your sales team or reference information that we aren't necessarily creating as marketers.
Yeah, and I would say, like, as you may know, there are more than 8,000 different MarTech applications right now in the market, right? And every company is using, I would say, hundreds of them, right? So one of the major part working around Marketo is to, you know, just learning and looking out for those different tools, right? Just look at, you know, what are those tools and what kind of problems they are solving. Just try to grasp some knowledge around that as well, because somewhere you will learn the overall architecture, not just from Marketo perspective, but from MarTech as a whole, right? So somewhere, if you are willing to do your Marketo architect, you know, certification, I believe it will help you there as well, you know, leveling up you there. So yeah, and one more thing, as Corey mentioned and Chelsea mentioned, just involve yourself into, you know, different community and you know, these kind of platforms. It's not like, it should not be like you are just asking questions, but you should also share your learnings, what you have done, what you just learned, right? Maybe people are doing things in more effective way, and you can adapt the same thing, right? So there are chances that you will still learn from your learnings. So yeah.
And I guess I could add to that, standardize as much as possible and try to remove single point of failure, 10 people after you. One of the tricks that I do is I try to write to myself in 3 months and say, what do I need to go through to be able to find the resources and things I need to do to remember how the heck I set something up? Like literally my biggest problem sometimes is, where did I put things? Like on it, there's a lot that you have to manage and a lot you have to create. All right. So you just have to make sure that you create a very standardized process that allows for you to easily ramp up on things or any elements that you're trying to teach your team for certain workloads, right? You really have to control it. And I think another question I get a lot is like, how do you manage all of the different like inputs that are coming into Marketo or launch points? And it's like, it's like Amit said, it's like you should have a flow diagram of how you expect the data to enter the system, right? Like it doesn't feel like if you don't know how that's working, you're going to get lost. And when you get lost and you start having campaigns running against data that you don't want, that's when you're starting to hit a bad spot, right? So you just want to make sure you can audit your stuff, you know what's happening, and look through your activity log. That is like the number one way to see how your data flows through your system. Like I can't emphasize that anymore. Like it's super, super important. I live and die by it. So
I think the biggest thing from my perspective with having become, you know, a certified expert is not to think of yourself as an expert. You know, we are all champions because we continue to be students of the system, to be practitioners, to try new things, to experiment, to, you know, find something online and go, I wonder if I can figure this out, and, you know, make it, you know, part of my repertoire. And you know, I always say anyone who tells you they know everything inside of Marketo is either lying to themselves or lying to you, or both. I think of maybe one person in the community, Sandy, who maybe could actually say that and be legitimately, you know, honest about it. But I think, you know, being an expert is a certification, a check mark that we get along our journey to show that we are competent within the platform. But the only way to stay in that position is to continue to evolve and grow and to expand yourself. I mean, if you want to grow from the MCE toward maybe becoming a champion, how can you contribute in the community? How can you give back? Where can you present? Can you get involved with user groups? Is there not a user group in your area? Do you want to try to start one? I think all of those things, and starting to put your thoughts and your ideas and your practices out into the community and bounce those off of others and find pitfalls in that logic and continue to improve is really the natural evolution if you want to continue to advance and learn in this tool and in Martech in general. All right, well, we are just about at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you with us. I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get through. I think there will probably be some forthcoming responses potentially coming out on some of those as well in future Champ blogs, those types of things. But again, thank you for all of your questions that you submitted and for joining us today for Champ Office Hours.